Our next speaker is Dr. Chris Hoffman. Dr. Chris Hoffman, DO, is the Residency Director and Director of Research in the Department of Anesthesiology at Virtua Health in Voorhees, New Jersey, and Clinical Associate Professor at Rowan University of Osteopathic Medicine. He previously held academic and leadership roles at Drexel University College of Medicine, formerly known as Hahnemann University Hospital, and Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in Philadelphia. His focus is on residency education, obstetrical anesthesia, and regional techniques. Dr. Hoffman has authored numerous peer-reviewed publications and textbook chapters, and actively mentors candidates preparing for the ABA oral board examination. He has served as poster judge, sessions moderator, conference vice chair, and has been an invited speaker at multiple regional academic institutions and conference. He'll be speaking on From Practice to Program, Lessons in Launching a Residency Program. Join me in welcoming Dr. Hoffman. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to speak. So, great. So, thank you for the introduction as well. And perhaps writing that I'm the residency program director for Virtua and Rowan SOM maybe should be in quotations because, as some know, we are in process of getting our program accredited. I was asked to come and speak, and when I asked what should I speak about, I was told to speak about what I know. And I've spent the past 18 months of my career getting very intimately involved in knowing the ACGME, as we've had to apply for our program twice. And as a few people know in this room, the ACGME agenda meeting for this cycle is in 2 days. So if the conference and speaking isn't busy enough of a week, drop a line to me, see how I'm feeling at the end of the week. We'll see how we do. So in terms of objectives for the day, I could speak quite literally all day about what stories and what anecdotes and what reflections I have over the past 18 months of trying to open a residency program. But the theme of this conference is Old Dogma, New Tricks. It's supposed to be a program focused on the future of anesthesiology. And having gone to many national conferences over the past year, 2 years, 3 years, what is the constant thing that's brought up all the time? The size of our field is too small. We need to be teaching more residents. Our programs need to be larger. They need to be suburban. They need to be rural. We have such a staffing shortage. We don't know what the next 5 to 10 years is going to look like. And yet, I can't think of anything that says old dogma more than the ACGME. Not that I'm saying that negatively, right? But it is a process that is not necessarily concerned about the future of anesthesiology. I'm here to share my experience on what I believe is the difference between our mission and the mission of the ACGME. I'm here to share some experiences, try to give something a little different, to the topics that have been brought up through the weekend. If this applies to you, then I hope that this is time well spent. Maybe somebody in this room plans on being a program director. Maybe they know a colleague who wants to be a program director. Maybe they know their department is about to tell them to be a program director. Maybe you join a practice and have one of these people in your department in the future. And if some of these experiences shed some light on that process, then it's time well spent. If this does not apply to you, then perhaps this can be a call and response to why we sit in many conferences and talk about the importance of growing our field, but why we often feel like that's not happening. So, step one, why? Right? You are now the program director, congratulations. And you need to actually start figuring out why you're even there in the first place. This seems a little basic. I promise it's not. Why is your department starting a residency? Is it a departmental goal? Is it your department chair's goal? Is it a pet project, or is it something more? But more importantly, is this an institutional goal? Is this coming from a chair or is this coming from a C-suite? And let's be realistic about why the institution would want to open a program. There are plenty out there who wish to be needle movers. They likely already have programs. But there are other things that are of interest, of course, right? Reimbursement, and I could spend a whole lecture just talking about the details of reimbursement. We don't need to waste time on that. We know that there is reimbursement and subsidy from Medicare and in some states Medicaid to support these missions. But there are other goals in mind, of course. Workforce needs, bodies in operating rooms. Physician retention. If we build a great program, maybe people will stay. Build some grassroots. They're already here for a few years. Maybe it's local competition. The hospital down the road opened a program. The reputation of our hospital is now going to become an academic force. These are things that the institution cares about. Why is it important? Because you need to know your audience. I can't count the amount of times in the first 18 months of my attempt at doing this where I was not knowing my audience appropriately, right? You need to know whether or not the people you're convincing over will be an unending amount of arguments and discussions and debate about what the future of this program looks like if you don't understand what your audience wants. Because if you're in a room with a bunch of people who only care about the bottom half of this slide, and that's fine, you could sit there all day and talk about the importance of your field, the importance of resident education, the importance of the future of our craft. Won't matter. And vice versa. Right? You can be in a room with a lot of people who have a lot of ambitions, and if you spend a lot of time talking about physician retention, you're going to lose attention from a lot of people very quickly. And just as important is why is what kind. And this was a bit of a lesson for me. Maybe this isn't a revelation for some of these people in this room, but it certainly was for me in the beginning, is that programs look different. Not every program is built to look the same, but most importantly, they're not meant to, right? This is the quote right from the ACGME, right from their website, right? It's important to read directly from it. The specific program aims consistent with the overall mission of its sponsoring institution is the goal of an educational program. There are distinctive capabilities of physicians that we intend to graduate. And a program can place different emphasis on research or public health or anything else that we find important. And some departments will be of the mind to produce physician scientists. Some departments will be focused on community health. It depends on the hospital that you're in. And if this does not match with where you are at, you are going to have a whole lot more hurdles in this process than you think you would. Knowing what kind of residency you have to offer tempers expectations. It tempers the expectations of the ACGME. It tempers the expectations of your colleagues. It tempers the expectations of your resident applicants. And perhaps most importantly, it tempers the expectations from yourself. So once you have your mission, now it's important to get it on paper. This is the first thing you have to write down. Your ACGME mission, your goals, and your objectives. This is the first moment of originality in the whole process. This better match, right, as we're alluding to. They will do their homework on you. You will have a site visitor. Maybe you'll have a couple. And they're going to come, direct quote, hey, by the way, I spent some time researching your department. Virtua, I've never heard of it. I come from Texas, Boston. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Can you tell me about the history of your health system? Make no mistake, they already did the homework. They're there to see what you have to say about your department, because this is going to gauge how you're measured. And if it's not measuring up, you're going to find yourself with a pile of citations you didn't plan for. Common theme here, initial conditions. What do you have and what don't you have? And some of these things are obvious. What is your clinical strength? What case mix do you have? What sites do you plan on sending residents to? But just as important, who's even interested in your building or buildings? Who above you is interested? Is this the pet project of one person in the C-suite? C-suite's pretty large. What do you have to start with? Write it down. Because make no mistake, they will write it down. Quite literally, one of the first sessions I had with our second site visit, we had a site visitor come and send a second email and said, oh, by the way, I have a request. It's not on the program application. I literally want you to write down 5 weaknesses of your program. Almost felt like it was an ice-breaking session, like I was about to walk into an orientation, right? Quite literally. This is not going to be perfect. People expect perfection in the beginning. It doesn't have to be. Infrastructure takes time, but the most important thing to do is to account for that. And if you walk in there thinking that your program is bulletproof or God's gift to anesthesia, it's not likely going to go very well. But you'll have your initial conditions. But just as important, you have to know their initial conditions. And perhaps this is the most important part of what I have to say today, right? Who is the ACGME? Understand the system that you're working with here. This is alluding to the beginning of what I was talking about, of the future of anesthesia, the future of our field. We know what our stated mission is. Maybe you craft your stated mission for the program. But what is the ACGME's stated mission? I have it here. ACGME, stated mission, to improve healthcare and population health by assessing and advancing the quality of resident and fellow physician education through accreditation. It does this by establishing and monitoring national standards for GME programs in the United States to ensure the quality of training. Does this sound like your department's mission? It doesn't sound like mine. It doesn't sound necessarily even like the ACA, ASAs, the ABAs, the AOBAs. Understand who you're talking to here. Their job is to establish accountability and consistency. It is not their job to worry about the future of anesthesia. Who's performing the roles? When I went into this, I thought that when I would start interacting with leaders in the ACGME, I thought that I'd be working with people like the AOBA or the ABA, the who's who of anesthesia. It is not that. The ACGME Review Committee, and again, I'm not saying this negatively, it just is what it is. There are very few physicians on those panels. There are certainly no anesthesiologists on those panels. Direct quote from one of our site visitors. It was our second site visit. He said, tell me about your first site visit. I had a lot of things to say. And he said, one of the things I wish the most about people like you would understand during these site visits is how non-clinical this whole thing is. You're sitting there worrying about the average resident's success. That's not particularly your audience for this site visit. The ACGME is not a government entity. It's a nonprofit organization. It has some immunity, quasi-judicial immunity. It's the governing body. And the government defers to them. But who is accountable when a program doesn't get something right, besides the program itself, right? If a medical school is not happy with the way that a program is going, if a hospital system, if a legislator, if a resident is unhappy with a match, if an applicant, if a resident, if the match itself, any of these things, who are they going to look to determine whether a program should or shouldn't have the right to accredit people? They go to the ACGME. Cursory internet search. This litigation is public record, right? The ACGME gets sued all the time, right? And they get sued because these things are not consistent. This is what the ACGME cares about. We may not like it, but if it's your responsibility to keep that program accredited or accredit it, this is the language that's going to have to be spoken. So now you have your idea, and now you have to get to the end result. This takes a ton of time, certainly a lot more time than I thought. We're sitting here about 18 months into our process. This is a fantastic article that I'm going to have a QR code at the end to link to that is a bit of a guide from a publication from about 10 years ago that has this timeline. I'll give you the TLDR. It's about 15 to 25 months from the idea to your site visit. It can take 18 to 28 months from that idea to accreditation, and then you got to go interview and match. It can take 30 to 43 months from the idea of having a residency to having your first resident. So talk about patience. And believe me, if you think that things run at the time of the operating room, please, I wish, right? But this is how long it's going to take, and now you need to build things up. And here's your first problem. There's not a whole lot of champions. There's never enough champions. Leaders have to come from a top-down approach. But who are your champions? And you better go find them. Which administrative supporter, which person in the C-suite wants this? Which one of your bosses is this the pet project of? Of your APDs, your core faculty members, many of which are private practice physicians who are now being told that they are academic. Who are the people who are actually interested in that, even a little bit? You better grab them, right? Because there's a whole lot of work to do. This is how it all comes together, right? And these are prerequisites, right? The sky doesn't have to fall, but leadership is important. We had a couple people interviewing candidates, and we're always interviewing, as everybody is these days. And we had people who we needed for critical care anesthesiologists, and they were being interviewed by brass in the anesthesia department, members of critical care. And we were getting a lot of interested candidates, not a whole lot of people signing on. And one of the feedback sessions we finally got after a few candidates was, well, you know, you had one of the guys interviewing in there, and he had a critical care doc sitting there saying, you know, by the way, we don't really need you. You know, the Department of Anesthesia needs you, right? We're here for the Department of Anesthesia, right? But we don't really need you. We'll get a place. We'll figure it out, right? Is that the type of program that someone is going to flock to as you're trying to build something in addition to what's already being provided? I don't really think so, right? So getting the right people in the right places early is going to prevent a lot of headache down the road. Speaking of more headaches, now it's time to get things on paper, and it starts with the most important document in the whole packet. The application's about 200 pages when it's all written, and it only really comes down to one, the block diagram. If you don't have where bodies should be for every single day for 36 months correct, plan on a citation. It's the most important thing, but it's also most important to know whether or not it's going to fly, right? You know where people should be. Does your boss think so? Does a site director think so? Does the ACGME think so? Do you not have what you need? And then you need to go get it from an outside institution and get a PLA, a Program Letter of Agreement. By the way, one of the largest rate limiting steps of the whole process, because you can get a colleague to say, hey, no problem, we'll accept your residence. Good luck getting the legal department to do it, right? Months of discussions just to get liability figured out, right, contractually. It takes time. But then you're moving to your application, right? And the application is another reality check. As I said, about 200 pages, give or take, but who's counting? At least some of it doesn't have to have ingenuity, right? Some of these things are wrought with policy, a little small, policy for work hours, policy for supervision, things like that. These things don't have to come, out of, something original, right? These things are likely already existing in your hospital system and other programs. It's not like anesthesia is usually the first residency being applied to in a hospital system. But some of these things do require originality, things like the mission statement and other things like that. And the number one challenge here is to know which is which. You put something boilerplate down where someone's expecting originality, expect to have to account for that during your site visit. Knowing the core requirements, knowing the subspecialty program requirements to the word is important, because if you put something down incorrectly on this application, you can guarantee you'll be learning how to correct it on your accreditation denial report. Get as many people to look at this application as possible. Other program directors are perfect, but the DIO is obviously number one, the designated institutional officer, your program director of program directors. We've been opening many programs at Virtua Rowan. Sounds like the type of person who should be looking at your application packet before you send it in. And then you're there. You're at the site visit. I have a rough run through it, right? But it's actually fairly short, but it is not easy. It's about 4 hours. The PD meets in the beginning and in the end. And in the middle, they meet a series of people like your core faculty members, maybe a DIO, maybe the chair. But prep is key, because anything that is not accounted for in that opening session, you can guarantee you'll be doing at the end session. Anything you say can be used against you, and will be, quite verbatim. Your denial report is written down. It's a legal record, right? So you're going to know every single thing that's said in those meetings. They actually record it. So prep people correctly. I prepped a series of core faculty members, and I said, I need cheerleaders. This is a new program. We need champions. And they said, no problem, we got it. And they went in and asked a question about adverse events. It was not meant to be a test question about whether we have adverse events. We train the best people. We have the best doctors here. No adverse events. That's not what they were asking. They were asking about what systems you have in place to assess quality and patient safety, not determining whether or not your core faculty members are cheerleaders or are the best of the best. Citation. And now you have to go answering things that people already know, because we work in anesthesia. I can't count the amount of quality forms I've had to write about every single case I've done. We are under a larger microscope than most. And yet, if you don't prep people the right way, the session is going to go poorly. And that session can include requests that are not on the program application. Hey, I'm a site visitor and I would like to see a policy on X, or I didn't really see an answer to a question I had on that form Y, not part of the program application. And you can say, well, sir or ma'am, that's because it wasn't on the application. You say, well, we'll be meeting at 12 o'clock. You'll have the policy written by then. I'd like to see it. I won't be finishing my assessment until I have it. The 2 hours in between 10 a.m. and 12, you'll be writing, because it's not an insignificant amount of things. The last one that we had, our second site visit, we had to create 7 policy documents in 2 hours. It's an expectation, and it happened both times. It's not, oh man, we really had a rough site visitor. This is part of it. And site visitors make conflicting recommendations. They said it themselves. I'm not part of the RC. I'm not the review committee. This is my report. I just generate the report, guys. What I want to see really just fleshes that out, right? That's your responsibility to complete, right? And if you're not prepared for that, someone like me isn't sitting here and saying, hey, by the way, that's going to be part of that. You're not just having coffee and lunch in between. You're going to be sitting with your program coordinator writing feverishly, and here you are, now you know. But the site visit will pass, and then you'll be waiting for your results, right? So that's what I can cram into 20 minutes of talking. I could talk for the entire afternoon about it. I have a dozen anecdotes, but I don't have the time, right? But what would I tell somebody who is trying to open the next program? I have a lot of thoughts about that. One is, of course, don't settle for institutional inertia. Oh, you don't need that subspecialist, because that program's rotation, that block, is not actually happening for another 2 years. You said it yourself. We don't need to hire that person. Some of these subspecialists are prerequisites, not requisites. And they don't want to hear that, don't worry, the program's going to hire one. So are the rest of the hospitals in this country. And yet they don't. They can't. It's a finite supply. They want to see these subspecialists hired before they accredit you. Get departmental leadership involved immediately. This is usually the idea and the brainchild of a few, and yet there are many. We have 50 private practice full-time physicians across our health system. How many of them are just absolutely geared up to do this? Not a whole lot, right? This takes a lot of work. You have to sell the program on your own department. Scholarly activity, prerequisite, or get a citation, right? You can't just say, well, it's a chicken and egg, Mr. or Mrs. Site Visitor. When we have non-clinical time and when we are accredited, we are absolutely going to be putting, things together, sending people to conferences. That's not what the ACGME is looking for. That's not the answer. It'll be a citation. And nothing will be handed to you. knock on the doors, call the review committee. They seem like a shadowy, looming thing. I promise they're not. I've had many virtual calls with the RC chair. Who am I? I'm an application, right, of one of God knows how many across the country. They'll take your call. They'll give you advice and counsel on a citation. Bother them incessantly. Write down what they say. Put it in your resubmission. There's nothing better than saying, well, I already spoke to the RC chair and they don't agree with that particular request. This is what we should be doing for the program. If you don't make the calls, if you don't bother the people, I can guarantee you they're not going to bother with you. That's internal and that's external, of course. And again, I can't stress it enough. Prep appropriately for your site visit. You may be the only person who's had experience here, especially if you're moving into an institution that is mainly private practice and is now shifting into academia. There are not as many champions as you think. Clear the day, prep everybody appropriately. It's not the most pleasant of a series of sessions. ACGME citations are like state citations. There is no such thing as checking a box. You have to go over and beyond. If you do get a citation, if you get a program accreditation denial, it's not good enough just to answer the questions. Anybody who's been on a JACO visit knows what I'm talking about. Thank you so much for calling attention to that citation. It was our oversight for not understanding that, not seeing that. Let me tell you, not the one thing we did to address that, but the three things we did to address that. That is the way to deal with concerns for the ACGME. And again, I've been in many of these meetings. I have yet to talk about anesthesia in 18 months, at least in the non-clinical part of my job. This is not their mission, right? It's not their responsibility to open programs. It's not their responsibility to sit at these conferences and talk about the next 5, 10 years and staffing ratios and things like that, right? Their job is to make sure that everything is being done even. There's an expectation here. Clarity is key. And again, starting early. Get a little patience. The program needs to grow, and so did I. I came into this, very doe-eyed, right? And with a lot of ideals in place. And then reality starts to change that. Nothing runs like the operating room. Not even half the other physicians in the hospital system run like that. Not a DIO, not other program directors. I wish everything ran on the time of the operating room. It doesn't. The only things that are relevant here are the timelines for the ACGME. Everything else is up in the air. And unless you're the person that are bothering people, sending emails, getting updates, it will never happen. And all of a sudden, 18 months can turn into 36, or even worse, the people who all of a sudden had that idea up at the tippy top are no longer interested in it, which is obviously something that we're looking to avoid here. So get your champions, hold on to them, ask everything of them. Know that your application is practically a legal record. Read it again, check every word, somebody else will be. And again, I'm saying that it needs to be poured over with a fine-tooth comb, but nobody's expecting perfection here. Certainly not the ACGME. What they do want to see is honesty and clarity. What they want to see is that you're corrective. Feedback loops are more important. Are you listening to what they have to say and doing something about it? That will get you 10 times further along than acting like you're the next gift to the field. Especially when you're talking to people who are not physicians. They're not anesthesiologists. They're professional educators. Most of them have masters in education. They're not clinical, and they'll tell you so. And that's what I have, which is, again, it's a gross summary of this experience, right? Again, like I started, I'm trying to offer a little something different. This has certainly not been what I thought I signed up for 18 months ago when I went down this pathway. But it's been very illuminating. It's been very, if I'm thinking selfishly, It's been great as an experience. That sounds wild. This has been abrasive, but it's exactly in a way what I signed up for, right? This is the challenge that I wanted. It's just there were a lot of lessons along the way that I had to learn on my own. Despite having great people that I've always been able to seek counsel in, there really is nothing like going through it. I have a few resources here. On the left is that article that I was talking about from 2016 in medical education. It's the guide to opening a program. It's very helpful. It has that timeline and a number of other things. Of course, there is an association, the Association of Core Program Directors. Lots of people there and lots of resources to be able to help people if this is something that you see yourself doing. And then finally, I swear I'm not trying to disparage them. The ACGME has been very helpful, right? They just are not the thing that many of us imagine that they would be or should be or could be. They are exactly what they are. And there is tons of resources on their website. Lots of different presentations like the annual specialty updates and program-specific accreditation instructions, program director guides. There's actually a superfluous amount of materials there for people. And of course, please, if anybody knows anybody who is lost in this process, please shoot me an email. I have a lot of experience on it now, just didn't really expect it. And maybe in a week, I'll have some good news to share with anybody who reaches out to me. So, thank you.